Thank you so much for joining the webinar. We're so excited that you all are here today for this presentation. We'll go just a couple more minutes as we watch the numbers go up here on attendees to let everybody else join, and we'll get started in just a moment. Thank you. Thank you again to those who have just recently joined. Numbers are still going up, but we'll get started in just a moment.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on discovering the power of IMPLAN's Forward Linkage Suite. My name is Candi Clouse. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success and Education Services here at IMPLAN, and I am joined by the esteemed Maria Lucas once again, our Technical Product Manager. And if you have any questions while we're presenting, feel free to drop those right in the question box. We will try to answer some of those live if we get to them. And if we can, at the end, we'll answer questions. If you want to raise your hand and unmute yourself, we'll be able to do that, again, if we have time towards the end. So without further ado, I will kick things over to Maria to get us started on the methodology of what's behind these new forward linkages. Maria?
Thanks, Candy. Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be presenting this new product offering today. We can go ahead and go to the next slide, Candy. Forward linkages are now available in IMPLAN. They are supported by the development of forward-linked multipliers. We've introduced 2 new guides that make it easy to run an analysis in IMPLAN based on your use case that applies to these new forward linkage capability. Our calculation of new multipliers looking in the opposite direction of our traditional multipliers enables supply-driven input-output analyses. Next slide. IMPLAN events and analyses have always been underpinned by backward-linked multipliers to calculate results. That's the traditional impact analyses you're used to with running events and projects in IMPLAN. Indirect effects have traditionally reflected upstream impacts. Upstream impacts refer to the demand from inputs that are pulled as a result of the direct activity that you're analyzing. So due to the production that's been configured in your events, IMPLAN historically estimated the demand-driven economic effects from that production due to those supply chain demand. All multipliers, to give you a little bit of technical background, they're all calculated starting with an input-output table representing the flow of goods and services. Each industry and institution in an economy is reflected as a column and a row in a square matrix. Those columns those columns are making payments to the rows, such that a column reflects all of an industry's inputs. An A matrix is derived by dividing each of those columns by its total to arrive at the technical coefficients for the industry's production. Multipliers are then calculated using the Leontief inverse formula shown here, where you see the identity matrix minus the A matrix, then inverted. So that's how we get multipliers that we use in traditional IMPLAN analyses. For forward linkages, the approach is essentially reversed. We start with that same input-output table, but instead of taking the columns and dividing them by the column total, the B matrix is derived by dividing each row by its total. The coefficients in this case reflect the distribution of the industry's output in terms of supply. With the B matrix calculated, the Ghosh inverse calculation presented on the right is applied to get forward-linked multipliers. So with some of those technical details out of the way, let's go ahead and look at an example. So when you run an analysis using forward-linked multipliers, the estimated economic effects reflects the downstream purchases of goods and services that are processed into different goods and services downstream. This is why forward-linked impacts are considered supply-driven. So you can see here on the right where the corn in our example is going to be the starting point in both cases. So starting with corn and looking downstream at the forward linkages, we see that corn is processed into many different goods and services, such as ethanol, corn chips, feed for animals, and then those are used even further downstream in transportation, for example, and then used as its other forms for other downstream activities, such as using that feed in agriculture downstream. Backward linkages that you're used to seeing in IMPLAN are looking upstream at what went into the inputs of a good. So for that corn, we needed fertilizer, water, seeds, and for the production of those inputs, there were other upstream production that needed to happen from utilities and water systems, for example, as well as agriculture. And so we get to see these two different flows now in IMPLAN, depending on what type of analyses you want to do. So continuing forward with forward linkages, we'll hit the next slide to talk about a couple key assumptions that go into forward linkages. So because we're still in an input-output framework, we still have similar assumptions that we need to keep in mind that are adjusted now looking in this new direction. So for the two guides that we have, we've kind of split those guides up into the two use cases you see here. Price change, cost push modeling is now possible in IMPLAN. And the assumption there is that there's no change in quantity of purchases of the good or service being analyzed. We're simply looking at the effect of that cost being pushed on further downstream. And when we're looking at contributions as opposed to impacts, like in the case of the price change, for contributions, there's the assumption that that activity is already existing. So for our downstream industry contribution use case, economic effects are attributable to the downstream supply chain of existing production that's being analyzed. All right, so now that we have methodology taken care of, let's see where we actually find this inside the IMPLAN application. So from the IMPLAN dashboard, you'll see in our guides carousel that we have a couple new guides there. Let me go ahead and click. Candi will highlight those. Price change cost push guide is the one of the two, and the second is our downstream industry contribution guide, those two use cases that we just covered. Depending on the type of analyses you're looking to approach, choose one of these guides, and we're going to go through an example of how we'll use those in just a moment. But in order to do these analyses, we also developed underlying multipliers. So you can also find new information about forward linkages by navigating to regions and going into the region details of a project. And you can click a couple times there, Candi, to highlight where you'll find those things. And inside the multipliers is where you'll see those new options for forward linked multipliers to see the details about the relationships going downstream in your economy. All right, so that is where you'll find it. And so I'll hand it back to Candi to start going into some examples of these two guides.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maria. We're going to start with our price change guide. So this is the first one that you will see, and you might ask, what happens when the price of something changes? And that's exactly what this guide is built for. If we have something like a tariff, a price increase on a certain commodity, maybe even something like climate change, what's going to happen with the end of the de minimis exemption and increased prices on imported goods, things like that. Those are the kinds of questions we can answer here with this first price change guide. So as an example, we looked at the BLS PPI detailed report for August, and that showed the producer price index for steel mill products went up 13.1% compared to 12 months prior. So how would we look at this? Well, here's what we pulled. Here's table 2 out of the PPI using that unadjusted 12-month percentage in steel mill products, that 13.1% that you see there. So how we're going to run this? Very simply through one of the IMPLAN guides. Each of these guides walks you through step by step on how to analyze your project by asking you specific questions. In this case, we're going to look at the US total, and we're going to look at a percent change in price of 13.1%. And that's going to be an IMPLAN commodity 3207, iron and steel and ferroalloy products. So what that looks like is about $29 billion, as IMPLAN shows us right here. When we get our results, we come over to this page. What this is showing us is 3 distinct numbers and then a written summary here at the bottom. This is going to reflect the estimated cost changes to industries if steel were at that new price. So if we look at that first number, the total annual cost increase of iron and steel and ferroalloy products, we have that $29.3 billion. That's the cost increase in that industry, iron and steel. The next number, the 27.6 or 7 there, is the direct cost to industries purchasing iron and steel ferroalloy products. Is everyone having trouble hearing me, or is it just me? I'm now getting a couple complaints about that. Maria,
You sound okay to me,
okay?
Candi. Yeah, you sound fine to me.
Okay. Well, hopefully it's not a wide-reaching problem. I'm getting some thumbs ups. Okay, I'll continue. Sorry about that, everyone. I just want to make sure everyone can hear. Kate is having issues. I know another person is having issues as well. Candi, you sound far away relative to Maria. That's interesting. Let's see what it's saying here. All right, how about now?
Oh, there you are.
Is that better? Okay, more thumbs up. Thumbs ups? Okay. Excellent. All right, let me start over on this page then. So what this is going to show us is the results from running that 13.1% price increase in the steel and ferroalloy products industry.
So this first number, the 29.3 billion, is the cost increase in those products to that industry. The next number, that 27.66, is the direct cost to industries purchasing from the iron and steel ferroalloy products. The difference between these two, about what we're looking at, 1.6 billion here, is what actually is affecting households, government, and foreign consumers. We see this number is pretty small here because not too many institutions actually buy these products directly. They're usually going into inputs for other industries, manufacturing, and things like that. And then lastly, that number on the far right, the 27.055, is the indirect cost to industries further down the chain. So we see all of this together. What IMPLAN has done at the bottom here for you is just written up a basic summary of what these three figures mean. You'll also find the details by industry. So this is going to show you the direct, indirect, and total costs by industry because of the 13.1% price increase in steel products. So you can see iron and steel mills manufacturing is number one there. What else uses these products? Automobile and light duty motor vehicle manufacturing, fabricated structural metal manufacturing, motor vehicle medical stamping, etc., etc. Moving on to our other guide, this is going to be the Downstream Industry Contribution Guide. And this guide is going to help us answer the question, how is this industry connected? What is the significance of the industry? Why does it matter? Every industry is important in different regions. There are different industries that are dominant. Maybe we're looking at strategic planning, cluster analysis, market demand, anything that's missing, a kind of gap analysis in terms of a supply chain, things like that. So this could help us look at things like, the automotive sector. When we have an increased auto production, we know how that supports our backward linkages from a traditional IMPLAN analysis, but that's also going to boost the demand for things like auto repair and new tires and windshield wipers and gas stations and things like that, spurring further economic activity. When we think of things like green energy, well, manufacturing might see demand for turbines and things like that. And then we see the benefit from electrification and cleaner inputs. So these investments can stimulate the innovation, job creation, and long-term transformation of regional economies. If we think about something like cluster analysis to support strategic development, we can help use this to help identify geographic or industry concentrations for potential buyers. So maybe it's around a certain element, maybe it's around a certain industry, heavy manufacturing, chemicals, things like that. Looking at how these industries are fully embedded both backwards and forwards in the economy. And then in terms of unfortunate natural and human-made disasters, when we have things like, price gouging and chaos, when essentials and gasoline and everything is going up, we all have to go shop for our French toast, home repair supplies. Maybe there's drought that creates scarcity in water, or we have bugs attacking crops, anything like that. So, being from Ohio, what did we want to take a look at? We're going to look at the corn industry. So I went ahead and grabbed Ohio, Industry 2 grain farming, and I want to look at 100% of grain farming in Ohio, and that's about $3.5 million in production. That should be a billion, by the way, not a million. Sorry about that. So when we run this through the guide, what we see is our $3.5 billion in direct output. That's the size of the industry overall. I could pull that same information from region details. That's the size of the grain industry in the state of Ohio. Why we see that 3.5 here? Because I ran 100% of that industry. Then what we have associated with that is the wage and salary employment of 1,600 people and contribution to GDP of about $865 million. Below that, we will see the details by industry. And this is going to show us what the indirect contribution by industry is in terms of output, wage and salary employment, and value added. So who's using corn? Well, animal food manufacturing, basic chemicals, frozen specialties, flour milling, poultry and egg production, all other food, etc. Pretty obvious suspects that show up here in the results. We also have a written results table that will summarize all of this for you, talking about the wage and salary jobs as well as proprietors, which are plenty in the agriculture industry, and how that downstream economic industry contribution looks. In this guide, you can actually tab over to the traditional IMPLAN tabs to see the details like the table at the bottom of the screen that we're very used to seeing. And what this is showing us is the direct and indirect, as well as total for the forward linkage, the downstream industry contribution here. There is no induced effect in this, and this is indeed an indirect, but moving forward instead of backwards. You will also see the tax results that are associated with it on that famous home screen that you are used to seeing. As this is an agriculture industry, we have many subsidies, so we see a lot of negatives showing up in that direct effect. But we can see overall that it is a net gain for the government in terms of tax revenue. So with that, we're going to go into some Q&A. I will try to pop open the question. Okay, we can hear Candi better. This is great. Okay, great, 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 great. All right. All right, Chris says, the results report should briefly explain why the total value differs from the direct value. As Candi explained, difference is government and export purchases. Do you know, Chris, Maria and I were literally just talking about that right before this call. So we will make a note of that because it's not obvious, and that is something really important to point out. So thank you for bringing that to our attention and raising that as a great addition that we could put in here. Um, I don't. Is this available for Canadian industries? Maria, do you want to talk about the expansion opportunities here?
Yeah, so at this time, you will be able to see the multipliers for forward linkages if you're curious about exploring those relationships. The guided flows that give you these, clean reports that Candy presented, that is something that we'll look to expand into Canada sometime next year. So we'll keep you abreast on the timeline for that as that's something in our roadmap. Glad you asked because we are curious to see what kind of demand there is for using this for Canada, but we expect there would be some. So thank you for asking, and we'll be moving towards that. So the
Yes,
free flow to explore the data.
thank you, Anam. That's a great kind of segue into this. This is just our first foray into forward linkages. Maria's done a ton of work on her team, on the product team, as well as working with our data team to make all of this happen. So this is just the first iteration. You're going to see a lot more coming from this as we roll out new features throughout all of next year. All right. Can you re-explain how forward linkages by industries differ from the backward linkages by industries? Yeah, let's go back to the corn. Here we go. So what we're used to seeing in IMPLAN is backward linkages. That's traditionally the Leontief model that we've all been working with for many years. This is the Nobel Prize winning work that he did. And that's everything needed to produce corn, right? So that's everything on the left here. It's all the energy, the seeds, the water, the labor, all the stuff we need to make corn happen. What forward linkages are doing are taking it in the other direction. So what happens when the corn is grown? Well, that's not where the story ends because that corn becomes an input for other things. Well, yes, I can in fact go to a farmer and buy corn directly in a lot of places. Corn is used as an input for so many other things, like ethanol, which goes into transportation, gasoline, all of those things. Food for humans, corn chips, and corn fritters, all the things, right, that we eat that have corn in them. And then feed for animals as well. So it's supporting all of these other industries that are buying from the corn. So if we were to think about the corn chip industry, if you look at this box right here, well, the corn chip industry going backwards would be, okay, it's packaged here, here it's turned into a chip, here it's corn, and backwards and backwards and backwards. But in this case, we're looking at the corn going into the chip, going into the bag, and then going into, a retail supermarket, for example. Did that answer your question, Tim? Feel free to go on unmute if you want further clarification. Nothing yet? Well, if you have further questions, let me know. Pop it in the chat or unmute yourself. Pardon me. All right, next question. Can we do both backward linkage and forward linkage analysis at the same time for an event? If so, any potential for a double counting problem? So the short answer is not yet. So at this point, the forward linkages are just in the guides. So you will not be able to add a forward and a backward linkage at the same time. Where you will run the risk of double counting is if you run backwards from corn and forwards from corn and count that direct twice. That direct should be the same in both instances. And what you really need is just the direct from either one, the indirect and induced from your backward, and the indirect from your forward. And that would eliminate the double counting. All right. Trying to get these in order, but they keep popping up.
I'm happy to jump in
Okay.
and help you.
No, you're all good. I've been talking a lot. You want to take the next question? Oh, this is a long one. Sorry.
Sure.
Suggestion: instead of characterizing the forward linkages as the result from a price change, it might be more useful to describe it as a result from a sales change, as opposed to a change in purchases like final demand with traditional backward linkages. The reason why this is important is that a sales change could result from either a price change or a quantity change.
I think we're specific to it being a price change for, in our case, because we are actually holding that assumption constant on the quantity of sales. Because this is an input-output model, we're not accounting, it's linear still in the sense and static in the sense that we're not going to have any data to tell us how consumers may react to the price change. So the assumption inside the model is that the quantity stays the same, and therefore that's why we're deeming it a cost push model, because we want that quantity to stay constant, and so the impact itself is just in the cost. And I know someone asked the question about employment. Can we see the employment impact from the price change? Because we're saying the quantity has not changed, the same amount of production is expected to be associated with that impact, and so the jobs are staying the same, and it's really just the cost effect to the industries downstream that we're quantifying.
Thank you so much, Maria. All right, we got a question. Can you demonstrate how to initiate the forward linkage analysis after login? Sure can. So here is my IMPLAN dashboard. I have right front and center here our two brand new guides, our price change and our downstream industry contribution. You simply just click one of these and it will guide you, as the name suggests, through your entire analysis. So if I wanted to look at a subnational region, I could pick anywhere I wanted to examine. Next. I pick what industry I want. So if I want corn, I would come into grain farming here. And if I wanted 100%, or I could put in my own dollar value here, if I only wanted 10%, whatever the case may be. This is showing me what it is going to run. I'm going to look at corn in Oklahoma this time. Okay, corn. And that's as simple as it is. This is going to default to show you those great tables that I had in the screenshots earlier, but that's really as easy as they are. If you have any questions while you're walking through it, you can read through all the guides. They link out to support site articles to walk you through best practices and how to get everything handled in there. All right, Maria, I'll let you take this one. How does it handle utility sectors? Obviously, some industries will utilize those resources more, but a lot of utility use comes from households.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so the impacts that we're showing, like Candy was saying, we're going to be capturing just the impacts to industries as a result of their purchase of that good or service. So we're leaving out any sort of impacts downstream to households. Of course, that would affect their cost. Households are likely to adjust consumption, so we're not including that here, and just keeping our impacts here isolated to that industry cost effect. So that is a kind of a leakage that's happening, as Candy was describing the difference between the actual change in cost and that direct change. So we could definitely highlight the change in cost to institutions here in the report better, because that cost does affect them as well. However, we're not accounting for any kind of change that might lead to in their consumption.
Awesome. All right, here's a question. Does the forward linkages allow you to model the effects of a change in labor costs, like a minimum wage increase? No, is the quick answer on that one. Maria, I'm not sure if you have noodled that at all, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, that one is kind of similar, and with the assumption of holding quantities constant. We haven't done anything on modeling changes on minimum wage changes. So the price changes that you can model here are specific to commodities. So we haven't tackled kind of a lever point for changing the price of wages, but that's something that we're going to continue to research.
And I will say, the more we hear from you, our customers and people who are interested in this, tell us how you're using this, tell us what you'd like to see.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we help prioritize what we work on first. And Maria and all of the product team, they love hearing feedback from what is working and what is suggestions for improvements for us. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us by contacting either your current customer success manager. You can always email feedback@implan.com or sales@implan.com. Maria, can you go over again why we do not include induced impacts on the forward linkages?
Yes, that is as a result of the fact that we are, there's no new jobs, there's no change in jobs, no change in income. And so there's no induced effects, because induced effects typically capture the change as a result of new household spending because of them earning new wages. So because we are not, we're assuming that, employees are not being impacted necessarily by this price change. There's no induced effect because there's no change in household spending in the way that we have structured this analysis and based on those assumptions.
Great. All right, here's a question from Megan. Could we get a repeat of how to avoid double counting, please? Missed that. You sure can. So if you were to pair a forward linkage model, let's go back to corn, with a backward linked model, the traditional IMPLAN, what you would not want to report twice is that direct effect. That direct effect will be the same between both of those things. And if you were to report the direct backwards and the direct forward, you would definitely be double counting. The indirect and induced backward and the indirect forward are separate and can be combined and reported as such. All right. How would you evaluate the forward or backward linkages for electric car manufacturing? Electric car does not have demand for gasoline, but other inputs. So specifically, if we were looking at electric car manufacturing, a normal event, we can modify the spending pattern such that we do not purchase things like the combustion engine and other pieces that would go into a combustion engine car, and perhaps up the spending that would go into things like batteries and other maybe components that make that very unique to a combustion engine car. That's an interesting going forward, because I don't know that it's going to capture too much of an electric car in the market, because it's going to be based on the averages for all cars and what they purchase. And given that electric cars are such a small percentage of the total market for cars in America, we are not going to see a huge use of the electricity sector for cars. There will be some, I'm guessing, but not a ton. And at this point, there's no way to modify the spending pattern of kind of what would be going forward to say that they're not going to be buying gasoline in this case. But that's something else that Maria can put on her fun list of things that we're investigating for future iterations too. All right, Chris. It would be really useful to be able to calculate forward linkages from a change in corn yields or fishery landings with the assumption that price per unit remains constant. Ah, that's an interesting angle. Have you looked at that at all, Maria?
That would be, I think, challenging that assumption on quantity, but definitely something we want to look into as a way to kind of break out of some of the limitations of IO, but will be coming as a future roadmap thing.
Fantastic. All right, Mariah, is there a way to identify how an industry at the national level may link to the state level? For example, if I want to find out the industries that receive any linkage and what percent by state. Not yet. At this point, we can only analyze one region at a time, but that increased functionality will be forthcoming. So stay tuned on that. Um, Okay, can we have a copy of the presentation or a link to the recording of this presentation? Absolutely. This will all be available on our support site right after the call ends, and that's everyone's favorite website, support.implan.com. You can pop right into the Learning Center, webinars, and it should be the top one on your list. As soon as the video processes, we will post it up in here, as well as the slides from today's presentation. Great question, Alan. Hirotsugu, I noticed you need to pick the industry by NAICS code. Can you do it using IMPLAN code? Yes, they're both available in that search box. We have the detailed NAICS in there because it's easier to search by keyword, but the IMPLAN industry is available as well for selection. Ernest, please, that slide again, corn. Oh, we like the corn slide. Okay. You will also notice that if you come into the support site, that very graphic is right here for your use and education when you are talking with the people, your constituents, about what these forward linkages mean. You can feel free to use this graphic as well. It is here for you right on the support site. And if you go to support.implan.com, this is actually the featured article right here at the very top right now. All right, Ryan, is there a tentative date for when we can expect to begin using the forward linkages analysis in our projects outside of the guides? Maria, I'll throw that to you.
We don't have a solidified date quite yet on that. That is something we are exploring. Sorry to keep you all on, waiting for these improvements, but we're excited to get this, initial release out and start hearing all of your input. So excited that a couple of you have mentioned that, but we don't quite have a date yet.
All right. Dareskadar. So the forward linkage analysis is only applicable for the price change events only, right? We have the two guides available from the home screen here. If you come to your dashboard, you have the price change and that downstream industry contribution guide. So there are the two events right now. All right, Tim, how do we best explain the differences between industries impacted in a forward linkage analysis versus a backward linkage analysis? It seems that the industries impacted in a forward linkage is how the backward linkages have been explained. If we are looking at, going back to my favorite corn graphic here, the backward analysis is, if we think of corn, is never going to involve what corn turns into. It ends at corn, right? So if we want to do the backward linkages of tortilla chips or Fritos, we would start here and go backwards. We would see corn in the chain that way. Forward linkages are saying what happens when the corn is grown. Now what? It's going to go into different things. So you're going to see completely different industries that are affected because what it takes to grow corn and what corn turns into are wildly different things. So hopefully that explains it. I don't know, Maria, do you have anything else that might help clarify it for Tim?
I think that's a great way to put it, Candy. That backward is really just going to be based on what needs to go into the production to make that thing. And forward linkages is, well, what do you use to make other things using that input?
Fantastic. All right. Ernest, can this be done by commodity? Maria, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, the price change guide, when you pick your selection there, you are actually picking a commodity. So the price change guide is commodity based. The contribution guide is industry based. Right now, you can't flip flop between those. So if you want to do something commodity driven, that is specific to the price change guide. You can't do contribution of a commodity. They're forked in that way.
Okay, I see one hand up. Tim, do you have a further question or did we get it answered? Oh, Tim's all good. All right. I think I've gotten to the majority of the questions that didn't get into weeds that we might have to dig into a little bit or things to noodle on our end. Are there any other questions that we can answer for folks? And I'm sorry if I missed any in the scrolling. It's a lot of questions popping up, so my apologies if I accidentally missed yours. If we didn't answer your question, we will get back to you via email. Either someone from our sales team or customer success team will be in touch. So stay tuned for that. But we do still have a few minutes if anyone wants to pop in and ask a question. All right, hearing none, just a few resources to point out for you. We have resources available from our marketing team that kind of walk you through this. We have the article on our support site about forward linkages. You can just check them out by playing with them in IMPLAN. Anything you want to do. If you have anything that you want to chat about, maybe a test use case or things like that, we're still learning about the cool ways that we can use this. So we love hearing from everyone about what you're doing with it and what you're able to kind of see when you do some analyses on your side. If you want to get a demo, you can always reach out to us, implan.com/demo-request. We will have someone from our sales team reach out and show you exactly how this works live in the application. If you have any other questions, our current customers, email your customer success team at support@implan.com. If you want to learn more, email sales@implan.com. And as always, you can ask Sam, the support bot, 24/7. Our AI support bot is the same on our support site as well as in the application. So that is completely linked and searches our support site and forum answers for helping you get through all of your analyses. So we're excited for you all to try this out. Please do share what you're doing. As always, we are here to help if you have any questions. So with that, thank you again, Maria, for doing such a great job on the presentation and all of your hard work getting this launched for us. And on behalf of the whole IMPLAN team, thank you all for joining us today. And I really hope you have as much fun as we do playing with the forward linkages. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Candi. Thank you all. Take care.